Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with a special treat for you all. This is The Hunt. This is by Salt and Pepper Games. It's designed by Matthias Kramer and Ingen Kunter, and the art was done by Albert Montez. Now, I have to apologize to them because this has been with me for a little bit, but unfortunately my health wasn't great and I wasn't able to get to it sooner. But thankfully, I'm doing a little better now, and I am able to jump on and show you guys how this game plays. Now, I'm going to tell you guys flat out right here at the start, I'm not going to be able to play this game and show it to you that way because it is a hidden information mechanic type game, all right? So you have to have two people to be able to play this game. That doesn't mean I can't tell you how it works, though. And the game is simple and deep at the same time because there's a lot of complexity going on, and it's all going on here with the Admiral Graf Spee, right? So the German battleship that's sailing around, and it's got the Altmark with it, and it's going around trying to sink all of these British freight ships moving around from port to port here on the board, but they are being hunted by some British task force who are trying to find the Admiral Graf Spee and sink it. So FYI, right up front off the bat, this is a prototype copy of the game, right? So not finalized components, but I got to give it to them. Good components for a prototype version. There are a few things that will be different, though. Some of the wooden tokens here will have certain designs on them. But for the most part, what you're seeing here is going to be indicative of what the final game itself is going to look like. So when it comes to the components, the main part here, we do have a mounted board that shows the little C area where everything is taking place. We have a couple of counters representing our German forces, which are the red counters. The blue counters are going to represent the British task force, and then there's a handful of counters that are the shipping counters. So these are the freighters that are supposed to be sunk by the Germans or protected by the British. Also included will be a D6 and some wooden tokens here, red ones for damage and yellow ones as hint markers, and we'll discuss what hint markers are here in just a second. We also have a neat little player aid for each side, the British side and the German side, given the basics of what you're able to do during your turn, things like moving your ships around, performing searches, attacks, things like that. Very easy to understand. And then the meat of the game itself is going to be a deck of cards that each player has. And these cards are specific to each side. So there's a deck of British cards, and then there's a deck of German cards as well. Now, when you're looking at these cards, it's going to have a picture, the name of the card, a number here, which is its AP points. So how many action points you get if you play the card for that. And then if the card is mandatory or played during a certain point of the game, it'll say so here. So in this event, this is a mandatory event. So this card will be played for its event. This one's a battle event, so it would only be played for a battle. And this is a hunt event. So this is played during like the card play section of a game. Some cards also say remove from game. If you have a card that says this, it will be removed, but only if it's played as its event. If you play it for action points, like this one is 5 action points, then you wouldn't remove the card. You will remove it if you play it here. In this case, this would be a reaction to the Graf Spee performing an attack. So if you do it that way, then you will lose this card. One last thing is at the bottom of the British cards, not the German cards, but the British cards, you see some symbols denoted here, things like binoculars or a little yellow disc. What these have to do with is giving the British player certain bonuses. They can spend action points to gain either those yellow hint tokens or an extra modifier when they're performing searches to find the Graf Spee. Okay, so how does the game work? Well, the game works based on the principle that, like I said, the Graf Spee is trying to sink the British shipping vessels, right? They're freighters as the freighters are moving along, okay? And we see our freighter here. As an example, this one says AR to GB. Well, AR's here, GB's up here, we've got BR and SA. So in this case, this freighter wants to move its way over to here and dock. In that case, they've made their journey, they're good. So the Graf Spee would want to come over here and catch them as they're moving along and destroy that freighter. The key portion of this game, though, it's like many other hidden information deductive games when you've got two teams going at it, is that the British side does not know where the Graf Spee is. This counter is not going to be on the board very often. The German player is going to keep track of this counter off the board. So you will need a separate sheet of paper. Something I personally think would work well is if you have some type of laminate that you could trace this with like a dry erase marker and have a separate map done that way. That way you could kind of mark and keep track of where you were. But even just a sheet of paper that you write what number hex you're in, and these are easy, 14, 11, 18, 24. Very easy to keep track of. But the German player does have to keep exacting information of where the Graf Spee is, and they will know, but the British player won't know. The British player has the information of where the Outmark is, but that's only a supply ship. Okay, so the Outmark can't be attacked. It can't attack freighters. It can't do anything. So it's not key in this game, but it does provide some bonuses to the German player if he keeps the Graf Spee around it during the game. So what you're going to do is each side is going to draw a hand of 5 cards that they'll have, and they're going to go back and forth playing their cards. It'll start with the German player and then go to the British player. For an example, our German player will use their cards to do a number of things. They could spend a card to gain action points that they could use to move their ships, and that's either ship, the Outmark or the Graf Spee. Like I said, though, they are not going to be telling the British player where the Graf Spee is, but they do have to tell the British player how many action points they're spending. So we see here that movement, you get 1 space, right, for 1 movement point, 2 spaces for 2, or 3 spaces for 4 movement points. So let's say they played this card for 4 action points, and they say they're going to spend 4 action points worth of spending. And the Graf Spee is here. They don't know that. The British doesn't know that, but the German player does. The neat part about it is that the German player has to announce, I'm spending 4 action points for movement. But he doesn't have to actually move as far as that allows him. So he could move 3 points worth if he wanted to, right? 3 hexes worth, but he doesn't have to. Here, let's say the Graf Spee is here. He could go 1, 2, go to this location where that freighter is and stop and just leave it like that. Now he's moved 2 action points worth of movement, but he spent 4. The British player is thrown off because he doesn't know exactly where he is. And he's thinking, well, he's moved at least 3 hexes. Well, he's moved up to 3 hexes, but he doesn't know if that's 0 hexes, 1 hex, 2 hex, or 3 hexes. It keeps the British player guessing. He knows he has to come for the freighters, but there will be multiple freighters on the board during the game, so he doesn't know which freighter he's going on. Maybe he's going to sell the Outmark away from the Graf Spee as a kind of distraction, or maybe he's going to keep it right there with him. It's impossible for the British player to tell. Now, during the game, when the German player does have a situation like that arise, so he has gotten into the same hex as a freighter, they can perform what's called a search action. And they will search for the freighter and have to do a D6 roll. On a 5+, they will find the freighter and they get to destroy it. They can use the plane to gain a +2. Now, what I mean by the plane is they have a little plane disc here. They get to use that, gives them a bonus, but they have to move it down and it's considered damaged after they move it. They can potentially repair that plane, but that's going to become harder and harder as the game goes on, because as the game goes on, you're going to have more and more of those cards that I showed you earlier. If I can find one. I can't find one here. Oh, here we go. I had one right there on the top. Remove this card from the game. Okay. So the more you have of those cards that have been removed from the game, the harder it is to repair that plane, because you have to roll a d6 number higher than cards that have been removed from the game. If you don't, then your plane becomes destroyed instead, and you can no longer use that bonus. Now, something else that the German player has access to that the British player does not is that they can perform a reserve action. That's what this disc here represents. And they can store up to 2 points of their action points for use on a later turn. So they can spend a card to gain 5 action points, spend 3 of them doing something, and then tuck away a couple of those points. So on a later turn, they can play a card for its event and still have some action points left to play. Now, after a player has performed their card play, right, for their impulse for that round, they get to draw back up to their hand of cards. The thing of it is, when it comes to the German player, if the graph spay is not adjacent to the outmark, they can only draw up to 3 cards. If they are adjacent to the outmark, they can draw up to 5. But again, that's another little trick that the German player has, is that they can be adjacent to the outmark and still only choose to draw up to 3 cards. Again, throwing off the British player, not allowing them to know exactly where the graph spay is. But if they do want to have that hand of 5 cards, they do have to be adjacent to the outmark, and they do have to announce that to the British player at the end of their turn and let them know, hey, I am adjacent to this outmark ship, so I will be drawing up to 5 cards. Now, of course, this is honor system and all that, because this will be kept track of separately off map, so the British player doesn't know exactly where this ship is. The British player, though, they're not at a disadvantage. They're actually at an advantage when it comes to combat, because they have multiple combat forces able to be onto the map. So when their turn starts, they actually start with something that is different from the Germans. They start with a freight ship phase. They get to move all their freight ships 1 space and draw a new freight ship if less than 2 are on the board. So looking at what we have here, there's only 1 freight ship on the board. A little bag will come with the game, and you will randomly draw these freight ships out of it. You draw a freight ship. In this case, we got one that focuses in. It is going from BR to SA. Well, BR is right here. And you see there are arrows on the map to indicate where the ships can enter or leave from. So a ship wanting to dock here has to go in from that direction or come out from that direction. You can't just pick any adjacent hex. GB up here is actually rather good. They can be docked at from any of these 3 hexes. But this ship, it would be placed here, and it would start moving along, trying to make its way down over to here. Now, again, that would be if there were less than 2 on there. So we'll just pull this one off and say that was our example, that this one was here, this one was drawn, and now it's going to start making its way over here with the graph spay attempting to take it out. Now, just like the German player, they can spend cards to gain action points to perform movement, and it's the same movement cost. 1 movement point, actually, excuse me, I did say that wrong. It's 1 movement point for 1 space, 2 movement points for 2 spaces, or 3 points for 3 spaces. So the Germans pay just a little bit more for that 3rd space. They have the ability for intelligence, which is what I mentioned earlier. They can spend 1 action point to discard a card for intelligence. And like I was showing you, it's relative to these symbols here at the bottom. It'll either be these binoculars, which will increase their searches, or the yellow disc to gain a hint at where the graph spay is. So let's say as an example, this is our setup and this is where the German player has the graph spay. If the British player were to play an intelligence and force the German player to place one of the yellow hint discs, the German player could place it anywhere around here to signify that the graph spay is either there or adjacent to there. So it narrows the scope, but not by a whole lot. Because if he were to place the disc here, that means realistically, if you're looking at it, it's not the best of information for the British player, because that graph spay could be anywhere adjacent to that disc or on it. So he's down over here, but maybe the British player is going to think he's up over here going after these freighter vessels. So it gives them an idea, but doesn't narrow it down too much. All right, so you're looking at it and you're going, well, all right, they've only got 1 force on the board. They've got a couple other naval forces over here. How do they get these on the board? Well, if you look at their player aid card here down at the bottom, they can do this once per turn per force. All right, so they can pay 2 action points to advance force H or K 1 space along the track. Now that track is this little track here. Once they get to the end, they get to come out and actually deploy onto the board. But they're going to have to spend a fair amount of action points over the turns to get these forces onto the board. So if they spent 2 action points on this turn, they can move force K up, and then on the next turn, they could spend another 2 to bring force, or excuse me, that's H, isn't it? Yep, H, to bring H out onto the board, so they would have another naval task force out there searching for the graph spay. All right, so let's say that our force here has moved and they've lucked out and they've got into the same space that the graph spay is located in. That's great. But remember, just like the graph spay has to perform searches to be able to attack the freighters, the forces, the British forces, have to perform searches to attack the graph spay. Remember, the sea is vast. You can't just spot a naval ship easily. You have to search and see if you can find that naval ship. They are going to have to perform a search doing a D6 roll. Again, they're looking for a 5+. And if they are successful in their search and the graph spay is located in that spot, then they will trigger the battle phase of the game where they actually attack and try to sink the graph spay. If, however, they are successful in a search, but the graph spay is not located there, then it doesn't matter. Even if they're successful, it doesn't give them anything. They're just simply told the graph spay is not located in that hex. Don't forget, though, that just like they can perform that disc, right, that disc action that gives them hints, the binoculars give them a +1 bonus when it comes to their searches. So they can get modifiers when they're trying to search for the graph spay as well. Just like the graph spay can use their plane to get bonuses when they're trying to sink the freighters. Okay, but let's say it works out for the British player and they search in the correct hex, and they're successful on the roll, and they have found the graph spay. At that point, the battle phase of the game is going to start. Each player will draw up to a hand of 5 cards, and what they're going to do is secretly select one of those cards, and then when you're ready, you lay out the card, and what you're doing is you're comparing the AP value of the cards. Whoever is higher wins, and the other side will take a red disc damage. This will decide the end of the game if it comes down to a battle, because whoever receives the most disc after the 5 cards have been played out will lose the game. So the winner is the side that takes the least amount of damage. However, the British will have generally an advantage when it comes to the battle phase of the game, since their ships grant an inherent bonus. This one grants a 1/2. This one only grants 0, so it doesn't grant really anything. But Force K, if it can be brought out, grants a +1. So to whatever card the British plays, they will get a +1 on it. This will also be when your battle events take place. So if this card were played out for its 2 value, you would also get to look at your opponent's cards and see what they have left and give you a little bit more information to plan out your strategy. The Germans have battle cards as well, though, like this one. Play this radar technology, it will increase the AP value of the next 2 battle cards by 1. That's a powerful card to be played during the battle. Now, that's one way the game can end. If it comes down to a battle, whoever does the most damage, they win the battle. That's going to end the game, and they'll be the winner. If the German player sinks 5 freighters, then he has won the battle. And there's one other way that it could be done, and it is through the card play of 2 specific cards. So if during a battle the Montevideo card is played by the German, this allows him to repair 2 damage, but there's a catch to it. If he plays this card, there's a reaction card that the British player has, and it's playable directly after the German event of Montevideo, and you win the game. So if this card is ever played, this card can be played in reaction to it, automatically giving the win to the British player. So now we talk about, like, what do I think of the game? And I gotta say, this one actually tickled me a little bit more than I thought it would. This is something that I think I could get my kids to play with me, my wife to play with me, someone who's not into war games to play with me, because it's got that like hidden gotcha, where are you aspect to it. And you're trying to hunt the opponent's pieces, and the opponent is trying to protect their pieces, but they know you're coming for them. And it's all about, where is this counter? Where is this ship at? And the ability of the German player to play mind games with their opponent, right? I think that's one of the cooler aspects to it. The fact that they can spend action points, but then not move that far, right? That they can set the disc around them, but it doesn't have to be right there. You know, it can be close. There's so many options when it comes to that, right? The fact that the German Graf Spee, right? If it's adjacent to the alt mark, it can draw up to a hand of 5 cards, so they can have more cards to play, but they don't have to. They can, they don't have to do that though. So they could be adjacent to their supply ship and still not draw up to the full 5 cards. And then that's throwing off the British player, because that doesn't give them any idea. Well, they might be adjacent to it, but they might not. They might be in the same hex. Who knows? You can't tell. The only real information that the British player has to go on is the fact that they know that as these ships are sailing along, trying to get into their ports, that Graf Spee has to get them. And eventually the Graf Spee will pop up and nail one of those. But that's going to be the only time that the British player is going to be seeing them. And then the next turn, they're going to be moving away again. So they have to use that little bit of information they have to try to spin their forces around, pincer in the Graf Spee, perform a search, and be successful with their search in just the right space. And I can easily see games where your blood's pounding, your pulses racing, because the task forces are closing in on you, and he's got one on top of you, and he performs a search, but he fails the search. And the Graf Spee's able to sneak away to go get another freighter. And now the British player is going, well, I failed the search. Is he still in this area? Or was he never in this area to begin with? You know, what's going on with it? it's that back and forth of what's really going on that is at the heart of this game. And of course, I think it's going to come down to smart card play as well, especially for things like the scuttling of the Montevideo card, keeping that one in the back pocket as the British player, just in case that the German player has his version of it that he plays during battle, because that's a huge thing to be able to repair 2 damage. That's almost a guaranteed win unless he has that card sitting in his back pocket ready to play, and then it's a guaranteed loss. So is it worth playing that card or not, you know? So there's enough going on with this game to make it tight and intense and a really enjoyable game. But I see it as quick enough playing that you could get in a handful of games in an evening, just depending on how long it takes to find the Graf Spee. You know, that there's no way to tell. If you find it quickly, you lock out, you know, the game ends quick. Or if you don't find it and all 5 freighters get sunk, and boom, you have to pop up to another one. The components themselves are simple. Like I said, map, counters, and the cards are the key things. The one thing, like I said, is if they could come up with some type of dry erase thing for keeping track of the Graf Spee, I think that would be awesome. The only problem with that is that would drive production costs up, and I don't think they're trying to go too high on that. So, but again, it's not really hard to have just a little slip, little notepad in your hand that you're keeping track of the Graf Spee on. You just write down what number hex that he's in at the moment. So yeah, absolutely. I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to try to talk the missus into playing it with me, because I think we would have a good time playing this, seeing if we could find it, or she could find me, or if I could find her. Just that, you know, gotcha gameplay. So yeah, ultimately, if you're looking for something you can play with you and a buddy, not taking too long, not overly complex, learn it in 5 minutes, but have a laugh and a great time playing it, I think this one's going to fit the bill. And like I said, it's by a good company, Salt and Pepper Games, same people that put out Resist by David Thompson. I've covered that one before, so we know they're going to have good stuff, good quality games, and relatively small packages. They've got another one I want to try out at some point, Sprawlopolis, one of those little city builders. I love those types of games. But this one is coming up soon. Definitely worth checking out if you like those hidden information type games. It really does look like it's going to shape up to be something exciting for a couple people to be going back and forth on, especially for those tight moments where you're like, oh, hey, you know, and you're talking after the game. Were you in this? Oh yeah, I was there. I was able to sneak through your forces and you didn't even find me. You had no idea I was there. You know, that type of gameplay. When you're done afterwards and you're able to talk about the game, I think this is going to deliver that in spades. If you're looking for solitaire, though, absolute pass. I was trying to think of it. There's really no way to solo this game. So you have to have someone you can play this with. All right, but that's going to be it for me on this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to put your comments down below. And like I said, stay tuned for The Hunt by Salt and Pepper Games. You guys take care. I will catch you in the next one.